Hey everyone, Grinn Games, here with Robin Arnott.
Hi, how's it going?
Not too bad.
Thanks.
We're here to talk about Soundself. Now we're here at PAX Prime 2014, a game expo, and you're providing an experience in that expo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about where this project came from?
Sure. So I'm Robin Arnott. I'm developer of Soundself, and I definitely come from a video game development tradition. Before doing Soundself, I was doing sound design on games. I did sound design on Antichamber. I did sound design on the Stanley Parable. I come from a place of, games are my art. Games are the space I know. It's the discipline I know. And before making Soundself and working on Antichamber and so on, I made an installation game a few years ago called Deep Sea, which was this immersive horror experience that the goal of that project was to try to create as immersive an experience as possible, and it was really effectively terrifying. But I'm here with something that definitely is not a game, because while the discipline of game design is what I needed to create this experience, thinking about interaction, thinking about the way your brain is processing data, the way your brain is selectively focusing attention, the way your brain talks to itself, and thinking about how interaction can, in this particular case, quieten those things and lull you into a trance instead of heightening those things. It has a lot in common with video games in the structure of the experience, but it's not what we would call a video game because it doesn't have goals. It's because it's not a goal-oriented experience.
It's not playable in that sense.
It's not playable, and in fact, you're not even, when it's working, when you get into that Zen state with it, you're not even thinking about it as you might think about a game. You're not strategizing, you're just there.
Let's talk about that process. So your booth here is a lot different than any booth that you've seen here. You have a tent. Mm-hmm. It is completely sealed off from outside light. I've taken a peek in there. It's very calming presence, a very mood setting.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the process and what it entails to go on this experience?
Yeah, sure. So what you might do, if you're here visiting at PAX, there's hundreds of distractions. There's so many things going on. Virtual reality, and I consider myself a student of virtual reality. It's this form that's been around for 30 years, but now it's right around the corner in terms of actually having a real impact on the way we interact with technology. That's coming around right around the corner. And I am here just before that really studying virtual reality and how we can use this technology in an effective way. So virtual reality is about separating from your world so that you can have a higher bandwidth connection between the meat and the human meat here and the perceptual experience of the video game or whatever you have.
Right.
So I think in most games that's sort of cosmetic. Like if you think about so if you have an Oculus Rift, you've probably tried playing Half-Life on the Oculus Rift because it was one of the early supported things. And it's really cool being in that environment and seeing it fully in 3D. But Half-Life is an experience that is engaging your brain cognitively. You're trying to plan things out. You are most of what's going on in the game is not really about that high bandwidth perceptual connection. It's about an intellectual engagement with challenging systems presented by the game, right?
Right. Yeah.
And in most video games, like imagine chess as an extreme example. The reason that you wouldn't think of chess as a great thing for virtual reality is the same reason that I think most projects most video game projects use virtual reality in sort of a cosmetic way. But in a project like this, like Soundself, where what we're doing is not engaging your critical brain, not using perception, sound, visualization, all of these things as a means to containing and describing an intellectual experience. We are instead using sound visualization as a means for breaking open your skull and giving you an intense perceptual experience that synesthetically alters your perception of something as intimate as self. And it does so exactly by quietening the brain, isolating the perceptual process from distraction, and engaging you in loops that pull you into a trance. So if you're here at PAX, first thing we do, you might be in line for a little bit because there's a whole lot of people waiting for our booth. You might, you'll get into our booth, we'll sit you down on the floor, further separating you from the outside space from distraction, serve you tea, a little bit of ritual to bring you into the space, because when we're here, we have to work hard. When you're at your home, you have the luxury of cooling down, yeah. But at this place, everyone's really tense.
Yep, hyped up. And,
we take the extra step just to chill people out, have some tea, talk to the developer, talk about the project, talk about whatever you want to talk about in there, settle into the experience. The experience lasts 15 minutes. You come out, you can hang out there for a little while, and then people come out being really relaxed, mostly, feeling, there's sort of this, you see this thing, people come out of it trying to describe their experience with it and being unable to describe.
That's probably pretty surreal for someone coming to PAX and probably completely not expecting to have this experience.
Yeah. And even people who are aware of Soundself and want to try it out, they go into it and they come out and say, that was nothing like what I expected. Because you can't form expectations around a perceptual experience that you have no anchor to compare it to.
It's not a game. It's not a game. It's not something you can see a preview of and you go, oh, I know how that's going to play out when I try it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it plays out totally differently between people who try it.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So the process. Yeah. What does someone do after the ritual, after the tea?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. So this is the part where normally when you're doing a game interview, where I would give you the meat of the game interview. Here's what you do in this game. You're managing resources. You are blowing things up, whatever.
Ammo, yeah.
Right. But here's the part where when we're talking about Soundself, I tell you something totally uninteresting. You chant. You go, and you breathe. And you chant, and you breathe. And what's happening, what makes it interesting is not what's happening on an intellectual level. Although there is something really interesting that happens on an intellectual level where people will come in, try to control the experience, try to master it, try to push all the buttons and see, and there's no buttons, but I mean, push all the metaphorical buttons and see what it does, right? But the experience so evades understanding that eventually people give up on that, and once they give up, that's when it gets on the next.
The floor drops out.
The floor drops out beneath you, and you're experiencing something else. You are not aware of time passing by. Your perception of self evaporates. And these are big things to be saying, and I say them like this out of observation. You're trying to borrow the words of people who come out of this experience.
Right, yeah, that's all you got. It's the feedback of people that have actually tried it. And you mentioned that before, that this has been your baby for how long again?
About 3 years. About 3 years, yeah.
And your goal was to test this out on people. And so you've been doing the con circuits.
Yeah. Well, so when you're designing a fun game, when you're designing, so there's a whole lot of really fun games in the Indie Megabooth that I love. And
I love the Indie Megabooth.
Me too, yeah. And playtesting is really important to game design no matter what. That's what, when I talk about bringing a game design discipline to designing a meditative experience, that's what I'm talking about. That's part of what I'm talking about. But when you are designing something fun, you can tell if it's fun yourself. There's a low latency interaction where you press a button, it feels good, and you know it's fun. Whereas with what I'm doing here, lulling you into a trance, hypnotizing you, it's literally hypnosis. It's a much higher latency feedback loop, and so I have to come to these conventions, see how people respond to the changes I've made, see how people don't respond to the assumptions I've made about the experience, and sort of tailor, build on the things that work really well, just cut off the things that are cluttering up the experience.
Right, slowing it down,
making it feel a little less alive. And it's taken just because I'm not building on 30 years of experience of what works or doesn't work in a first-person shooter, right? And I love first-person shooters. I think there's something really to be said about polishing a certain genre to the 100th, 200th iteration, right?
Right, yeah.
But I don't have that benefit, and so I have to experiment, test all of my assumptions, and the only way to do that is coming places like this.
So this experience requires a bit of equipment.
So it doesn't actually require the Oculus.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay.
What the Oculus Rift does for us is gives me, like I was talking to you about before, low bandwidth, high bandwidth. for Soundself, the Oculus Rift, that high bandwidth adds a tremendous amount to the experience. But you can get that high bandwidth with a dark room and a projector and headphones. The Oculus is just, I think, the first virtual reality device that really gets in, that does it incredibly well.
What does the Oculus Rift play into this?
So, I see Soundself as fundamentally a virtual reality experience. It is an alternate reality that you immerse yourself into. And it's not an alternate reality in the sense that, this is a three-dimensional universe. Like most alternate virtual realities are still obeying the basic rules of our reality here.
Right.
3 spatial dimensions, a 4th time dimension, and plus craziness. I don't know. It's like scuba diving or something like that.
Sure.
Whereas this is a different kind of virtual reality. It's a different kind of reality that we don't have the vocabulary to talk about unless you've been meditating for years or whatever. So I think that I really think that in about 10 years, maybe even less. So first, virtual reality probably coming out next year. When it works, it's going to drop. It's going to totally transform our relationship with technology.
I believe so too.
Yeah, and we see it coming, but we don't really see it coming. You know we can see the bomb dropping. That's a horrible metaphor. Oh God, that's an awful metaphor. I need a better metaphor than that because that's really bad. I don't know. You could see the train pulling into the station, but we don't know what's in it. And I think that in about 10 years, talking about games as the umbrella term for these sorts of interactive experience is going to outlive itself. I think we're going to be talking about games as a type of virtual reality experience. Because just as I was saying, Deep Sea, my previous experience, which required the player wear a gas mask, at the time I would not have called that virtual reality.
Interesting, yeah, okay.
But now that I have the vocabulary to think about these experiences as immersive virtual worlds, I recognize that what I was making was a virtual reality experience. It wasn't a head-tracked visual virtual reality experience, but it was a virtual reality as immersive as anything for Oculus. But over the next few years, I think we're going to see a lot of people questioning the assumptions we've been making about games, about interactive experiences for the last 20 years, 30 years. We've been building on assumptions, and now we finally have a really high bandwidth tunnel into players' brains, and like a communion between a player and an interactive experience that is so much more high bandwidth than it was before. And we're already seeing a lot of assumptions that we've been making about games for mouse and keyboards just not working out in virtual reality anymore, while other things that don't work out with a mouse and keyboard flourish and are absolutely beautiful in this space.
Well, we were waiting for that to happen, it seems like. It's just like that. It's like a third arm that grew.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, now we know how to describe this thing. Now we know that we can expect more of this thing.
Absolutely.
And one of the most, I think some of the most beautiful things being developed for virtual reality right now are only games because we don't have a better word for them yet.
Sure.
Soundself is definitely one of those things.
Yeah, and I think that's the area that virtual reality will probably grow into.
That's just so.
And bloom these sort of games experiences. Yeah. So the Oculus Rift for you in this experience is providing, you said, a visual kind of.
It completely encompasses everything you can see, which cuts out any distraction. And that's really important for an experience like Soundself, because what I'm trying to do is quieten your brain, and distraction. Your mind leaps onto anything it can to tell a story, and if Soundself's not really giving you anything concrete to tell a story with, it's giving you something abstract, and so your subconscious and pattern-finding brain has to work harder for it, which gets you on this really deep cycle and pulls you into this space. If you see out of the corner of your eye cars passing by or something like that, you'll start telling yourself a much easier story. One about being in your apartment instead of one about looking into God's eye. I think if I do Soundself well, I think in 10 years people will look back on Soundself and say that was a fumbling attempt at something that we're now doing really well. Because it's entirely new, it's totally different.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's something entirely new, totally different that really suits the strengths of this new space.
It is an experimental field, and it seems like you're kind of pioneering that sort of area.
Yeah.
So the name itself,
Soundself.
Yeah. It's pretty self-explanatory.
I think so.
You are listening to yourself and kind of opening that, that auditory and that channel.
Yeah. The fundamental thing here is Soundself is an experience of self. And that sounds like such gibberish. I know to a lot of people watching, that sounds like I'm just, some crazy hippie, and I am that. But the sensation of self, everything inside here is me, everything outside here is not me, is something your brain creates. And it's a very useful story your brain tells, because if I didn't have that story... Yeah, if I didn't have that story, I'd just be like, I could chop off my thumb or whatever, right. And then this body would not have a thumb anymore, that would suck. But that doesn't mean it's not flexible. And flexing and stretching that, as we already do in video games, I jump by pressing the A button, I turn by moving the stick. Your sense of self expanding to include whatever the avatar is. As we can stretch that, Soundself is an experience about stretching that as infinitely wide as a piece of technology can get you to do. So self is a very core part of the experience.
It sounds like an incredibly ambitious and very interesting experience to be a part of.
Thank you.
So, Robin, I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah, and I really look forward to it. When could we maybe think of a release date, or?
I'm going to be taking my time to just polish it, and as soon as Oculus is ready to ship the Rift, I'm going to be ready to ship Soundself.
Excellent. And are we looking at a release on would it be on a Steam platform?
Yeah, it'll be on Steam.
Okay.
We are going to support PC, Mac, Linux.
Okay.
If people are impatient, they can buy the alpha right now, which is super buggy, but you get to try it out. And
where can they find that?
Soundselfgame.com.
Excellent. Well, again, I appreciate your time, and we'll go ahead and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Stay tuned.